Everybody, welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be doing the support list for patch 11.10. So as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to like and subscribe. It really helps out a ton on the channel. Come by, check out the stream. Starts around 11:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, only on YouTube every night. Usually goes till about 2:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Very friendly, chill community. We'd love to have you. And check out the rest of the content as well. I do fresh patch notes and tier lists for every patch, and then I have individual champion guides, macro guides, like how to one trick, how to macro better, how to micro better, vision control, does luck exist in League of Legends, and tons of other topical and content guides. So check all that out, and I'll also cover Total War. I'm getting back into that. I'm going to release at least one episode of Total War a day, and I'm going to be covering Classic WoW TBC when that comes out. I'm going to be playing a Resto Druid, so we'll probably be streaming some of the raids, and I'm going to be doing some guides for that as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get in here. So number one on my tier list is going to be Rakan, and he's always number one or number two. And people ask me, or like tier one or tier two, I should say, and people ask me on stream all the time, why do I have him so high? And there are some other content creators who don't have him so high. And a big part of it is his potential is just really high if you're good on him, and he's just a great defensive blind pick. Like, he's just good into almost anything. Yes, there are some CC champs that can give him a hard time, but it's almost always a skill check champion. Like, you have the tools to outplay almost anybody. You know, he's good if you're getting camped. It's really hard to run him down. He's good if you need engage. He's pretty good at scaling, not quite as good as something like a Lulu or a Yumi, but he can get things like Ardent Sensor, like Staff of Flowing Water, like Zeke's. All of those can help buff up an AD carry who's fed. And so he just has lots and lots of potential there. And he can do some decent AP damage himself, so he's okay in all ends, especially if you get some AP early. He can actually throw down some decent damage in the early game. But really the name of the game with Rakan is just his mobility and his versatility. So that's what I really like about him. You do have to be careful because he is squishy relative to other engaged tanks, so you have to really time your engage well. Use your cooldowns intelligently so that you don't get caught out, you don't get blown up. But if you do that, then he does have the tools to get it done. Now, one thing that has helped him out recently a ton is Shirelia's, and he was one of the best Shirelia's users before the buff a couple of patches ago. And this has just made him even better, because when he engages, he can get in there fast himself with his R, but then sometimes it can take your teammates a little bit of time to catch up to you, and by that time, you know, your CC may have already worn off. Because they have to follow up pretty quickly because your W knockup is only 1 second. And so they really have to get on it. It's not like something like a Leona or a Nautilus where you can lock them up for like 4 seconds and you can take a beating while you're doing it, right? So if your team takes a little bit to respond, it's not as big of a deal because they have such a huge window to respond, and you're not going to get blown up immediately. Versus Rakan, if they don't follow up immediately, then they're going to lose that window, and you're probably going to get blown up if they don't get in range for you to E back out. So it's very good for getting the whole team in range there. And then because he can double shield to protect his allies with 2 casts of E, then you can get that bonus movement speed on multiple people in a fight with the Shirelias, which is very awesome. So this item is just fantastic on him. It's been good for a long time, and with the recent buffs, he is one of the best users of that item. And then CDR is just really good, or ability haste rather, so Ionian boots are fantastic on him as well, as he has really high impact abilities, but they're pretty long cooldowns. Like your W is 12 seconds at max rank, your E is 12 seconds at max rank, and then your R, of course, has a pretty long cooldown, but it's very powerful. It's one of the best engage tools in the game because you can run up to people, especially with Shirelias, and force them to use their flash or their dash or whatever first, and then you can use your W to catch up to them after that. So he's very sticky. And he's just got a lot of different tools in his kit. So that's why I really like him. In the past, people have gotten Imperial Mandate, but I think that's been nerfed so much that it's just not really worth getting on him anymore. And then Locket, some people get that, but I think that's largely a bait item. Yes, it does provide some, you know, protection, but you really need that mana regen early on, and he scales so well with ability power. His E has a 1.6 ratio off of both shields. His W has like a 0.9. His passive shield's like a 0.9. The healing on his Q is like a 0.7 or 0.8 or something. So he actually has really good AP ratios. It's just difficult to build a lot of AP into his kit. You can go for the Staff of Flowing Water, Ardent Sensor if you want, but you are going to be a bit squishier. So most people go with Zeke's, but you can go with one of those other 2 items as well. But That's why I have him up there. Good engage, but also very good defensively if you get camped or your team doesn't follow up or whatever. He's just got all the tools that you need, whether you're behind, whether you're ahead, whether you need engage, whether you need scaling, protection from assassins, whatever it is, he's got your answer. It's in most matchups. And even kind of the rougher matchups, excuse me, like Morgana or something like that, you can outplay it, right? You can dodge her Q, especially with the extra movement speed off of Shirelia's. And if she black shields somebody, you can just go on the other person and probably still get a kill. So there are some matchups that can be annoying, but I think he's definitely serviceable if you play him well into most matchups. Even Leona, who is considered like a pretty hard counter to him, if you just wait on her to go in, she goes on your AD carry or whatever, you just ult, shield your AD carry, that's going to put Guardian on him, that's going to charm her to buy a little bit of time, and then you can just W over to their threat, their AD carry or whatever, and then shield back to your ally, and you're going to protect them from most of the upfront damage, and you're going to lock up their AD carry and Leona long enough to neutralize a lot of her CC. And then at that point, it's basically just, your cooldowns versus hers. Now, she's going to have a lot more CC on a lower cooldown, but then she's going to be really far out of position. So your AD carry should be able to kite back for a little while and really punish her for going in. So I think that he's a pretty good disengaged type of champion too. Okay, so Rakan, he's awesome. Very underrated right now in the meta. Yes, his win rate's only like 50%, but that's just how it goes with a lot of kind of the higher skill cap champs. They're just not going to have much more than 50%. Thresh is about 50% right now. Yumi's about 50%. Yumi actually is pretty high skill cap. We'll talk about her here in a second. But let's talk about Lulu first. Now, Lulu, most people should have Lulu in Tier 1 right now. She did get a couple of buffs a few patches ago. She has the highest PBI, which is pick ban influence overall. So she's banned a ton. She's picked quite a bit. And her win rate is okay. It's like about 52%. But what is it that makes Lulu really strong right now? Well, a big part of it is she just provides so much offense to specifically really fed people on your team, especially auto-attacking champions, because she gives a lot of extra attack speed with her W, and then when she puts picks on someone with her E, that's about 88 extra per attack damage off of her passive picks when you put that on someone else. So you can buff up like your AD carry with movement speed, attack speed, and effectively somewhere around like 80 on hit damage. It's on attack damage, so it doesn't work with Gensu's or anything like that, but it's a hell of a lot of damage per auto attack, while also being a pretty respectable shield that doesn't decay, so you get full value out of it versus something like a Janna that's going to decay on a pretty low cooldown. It's like an 8-second cooldown. At a reasonable mana cost, too. It's only 80 mana versus Janna's shield's like north of 100. So, very, very powerful. And she can actually trade pretty well in lane early on, too. I mean, your E plus your Q is quite a bit early, and then just your auto attacks with picks do quite a bit of damage in the early game. And usually you can just go up and polymorph the AD carry. If the support engages, you just poly the AD carry and just start blowing up the support or the AD carry, whoever your AD carry is focusing. So, very good at small trades, and pretty good game against assassins too, because you can polymorph them with W. So great against things like Echo, things like Zed, who goes on your AD carry. Just a lot of champions like Riven, Camille, any of these like squishy champions that rely very heavily on lifesteal or their mobility or just something. Like, they don't build a lot of tanky stats. They just rely on, some other mechanics in their kit or lifesteal or whatever. She shuts that down with polymorph. Very, very good against Echo, because when he tries to dive in, you can polymorph him, and then he's not going to be able to press his R, and that's what he uses for a lot of his survivability. So it just has really good game against a lot of things. Your R is an instant infusion of health that gets around Ignite and Grievous Wounds. So she's very strong. She does have shorter ranges, so her E is only 650 and her W is only 650 range. So you do have to get a bit closer to the action, which means you might get hit by collateral damage like an Amumu ult or Rumble ult. Things like that. You're going to be a bit more at risk, but overall she's still going to be super strong if you get ahead. Even her first couple of levels, like the wave clear with the Q, is okay if you're trying to push in. But yeah, Shirelia is also really awesome on her. A lot of people might still be going old school Moonstone build. It's bad. You need to go Shirelia's. Look, it's got a 4% higher win rate. This item's just so good. Just Shirelia's on everybody who's not a tank, and just you'll win a lot of games. Because that extra movement speed is just so huge. Just putting the E on somebody or putting your W on somebody counts as interacting with them or your ult, and that's going to give out a lot of extra movement speed. So, another ally champion grants both allies. Yeah, and it grants you that extra movement speed for 1.5 seconds too. So it was really strong. If you guys don't remember Karma from a couple of years ago, they did something like this to her where they gave her like extra movement speed for just like 1 extra second on her E. Completely busted her, and she was just banned for like a month or something, and she had like a really high win rate. So just giving out extra movement speed that's pretty simple to proc is just massive, because movement speed is, if not the best stat in the game, certainly one of the best stats in the game. Because everybody likes it. It's all good. I mean, that's why they took it off of Staff of Flowing Water, and I found it pretty funny that they figured out it was OP on Staff of Flowing Water, and they substituted it out with Ability Haste, and then they simultaneously put more movement speed on Shirelia's. So it's like they knew it was OP, but they wanted to double down on Shirelia's. So, anyways, she's super strong right now, great at buffing allies, good at getting, you know, a lot of the same buffing items that I talked about with the Rakan, the Ardent Sensor, the Staff of Flowing Water, Redemption, you know, all of the Enchanter items are going to be solid on her. Okay, and then Yumi is another one, and this might be higher than a lot of people have her, but she did get a buff on this patch for an extra 15 damage on her empowered Q, and she's very, very good if she can get out of the laning phase. And the thing is, even if you fall behind a little bit in the laning phase, she's so difficult to deal with late game, because she gives so many buffs to your allies. Right, your W gives them extra AD or AP. Your E gives them extra movement speed and attack speed. Your R, of course, is an AoE, you know, root for 1.75 seconds. You know, even at level 6, your Q is like basically a homing missile for trading in the laning phase. It is expensive at 90 cost, but if you're able to hop off and land auto attacks pretty frequently, then she's good. So I think she's good against a lot of other enchanters who can't really punish her for trading in the early game, or some of these like poke champions. You have to be very careful when you're against something like a Leona or a Thresh, though, because you're not going to be able to hop off, or they are just going to CC and kill you. So there are certain matchups where it can be kind of rough, but man, she is fantastic. If you compare her with like a Jinx or a Kog'Maw or something that takes cleanse, and then you take like exhaust and heal, it's just going to be almost impossible for them to kill you, and you're going to get so much value out of her passives. So super strong, works great with pretty much anybody late game. If anyone's fed on your team, you know, just throw her on the Hecarim, throw her on the Darius, the Olaf, I mean, just anything pretty much, and she's going to start going off. So she's very strong. And the thing is, late game, it's so hard to assassinate her to pick her off, and that's why she was one of the only enchanters to be played consistently in pro play until they really nerfed her a lot a year or two ago. But it's because later on in the game, you can just attach to a tank, and you're no longer a liability, right? They can no longer pick you off. So she just does a ton to boost up her team. You know, lots of high elo people really hate her. And people say that, you know, she's mindless, you just stay attached. But she's actually kind of tricky, because the way her mana works right now, you have to jump off in a lot of fights and auto-attack in order to get enough mana just to stay in the fight, unless it's over really quickly. So picking that opportunity to hop off and auto-attack for the mana is huge. And you get a very, very big shield off of that, too. It's like a 300 or 400 shield most of the time. So you got to be careful, though, because if you get hit with any CC, you're going to be screwed. So I think that she is still pretty good. I would go with the Airy Scorch build. Remember that Presence of Mind still does refund 15% of your max mana on assist. I asked the stream that the other day when I wasn't sure, when I was thinking about picking Yumi in a game, and several people said that it no longer did that, right? And so I'm just bringing that up because I just want to clarify, it does do that. It is still very, very good on her. If you get a killer and assist, you have to have this rune. It is mandatory. It will give you a ton of mana back over time. And even just hitting your Q consistently in the laning phase, if you have Spell Thieves and you can activate Mana Flow Band early, you really need that mana so that you can consistently provide harass, and if necessary, provide the heals as well. So pretty mana intensive, but I mean, look at these win rates. Yeah, it's bad early, but then, you know, if you end up in like a 25 or 30 minute games, you very quickly starts becoming one of the best supports in the game late game. So there is quite a bit. And you know, another part of the skill of her is learning how to abandon your teammates, right? If they're about to go do something stupid, you have to leave. You hop off and you run away. You ping them back, you do the best you can, but then you just abandon them. You have to do that. So she's one of the... You get punished the hardest on her than probably any other support if you commit to doing a stupid play that your allies are doing, right? With Janna or something, you might be able to run away, or with Rakan, you can probably run away. So you can stick around and see if you can help them and try to escape with those champs. With Yumi, if you're out of position, you're not getting away. You're definitely dead. So you have to be, very cutthroat and just abandon people and just let them die if something dumb's going on, because you don't want to give up those extra kills. But anyways, she's super strong right now. I think she's very, very underrated. She just scales so well with a lot of the popular champs right now, like Jinx. Even someone like Jhin is very good because the extra raw AD that she gives ends up, modifying a lot of his stuff that he has going on. His crits, his passive, all that stuff is very good. And then the extra movement speed on him. He doesn't benefit a ton from the attack speed, but like the movement speed and the extra AD that you give him is pretty huge. So there are several champs that she's very good on. I wouldn't recommend playing her on stuff that doesn't scale super well. So like Lucian or Ezreal or something like that. I don't think that she's that great. But if you can get the Jinx or the Kog'Maw or the Twitch or whatever, and again, if they take Cleanse or if you get an early Mikhail's like second item, she's very good. And I will say, just like I talked about with Lulu, you want to be going Shirelia's. There's a big difference between Moonstone and Shirelia's. Moonstone is garbage on most champions. It's not as stark of a difference, but it's still a 2.5% win rate to get Shirelia's over Moonstone. One trick you can do with this is just hop off and hop back on anytime you're going anywhere. That counts as affecting your allies. So you give them the movement speed buff. So just every time your hop off and on is available, just do it when you're rotating around the map, and it'll help you get there faster. And in team fights, if it's safe to do so, just jump around to a bunch of different teammates and you'll keep giving them all the movement speed. Remember, it's just a 4-second cooldown on the Shirelias for that. That's huge. And you keep giving everyone Airy when you do that also. Because Airy, reattaches after like 1 second whenever you jump onto somebody. So if you can afford to do it and not get blown up and not get CC'd, trying to jump around in fights can be very beneficial if you can make the right choices with that. But again, you can get caught out. You can get blown up. So that's where it gets kind of tricky with Yumi. So yeah, it looks easy, right? If you just attach yourself to, a 20 kill Darius or something like that and just press E to speed him up, yes, it looks easy mode. But in a lot of situations, it can be very difficult to figure out where you're supposed to go and is it safe to jump off and get that auto attack for the shield. Okay. Leona, don't have to say that much about her. She's getting a lot of play in pro right now, so she'll probably be nerfed soon, but she's super strong. I mean, you could make the case for her being number 1 if you really wanted to. Very low cooldown abilities. Her Q's like 5 seconds, and then her E ends up being like 6 seconds. Her ultimate is 90 seconds. So she does very, very well with a lot of the new ability haste items. You just want to go lock it into Zeke's, 90% of the time. They did make a change to Abyssal. Is it Abyssal? I don't know if it's called Abyssal Mask anymore. But the tank item is 2700, Abyssal something or other that I'm blanking out on right now. That could be a situationally a pretty good item on her if they have a lot of magic or a lot of magic damage on their team. Because they changed it now to where you get a little bit more health, but most importantly, you increase the damage that your allies do by 15% to any target that you've CC'd. And since her CC is on such a low cooldown, you can pretty much permanently increase the damage to the target by 15%. So that is a pretty good item. I don't think that it has any ability haste on it, so you would only want to get it situationally, but very strong item, low cooldowns, great engage. So you might ask her, why don't I have her number 1? She's very risky. So if you fall behind, it can be difficult to engage without getting blown up. Like, you have the opportunity to get back into the game, but it's just so tough. Or if you get, ganked, you go in, you get baited and ganked, you're going to die, basically. If you go in, you're going all the way in. There is no escaping. And so sometimes that's good because you have a lot of sticking power, but sometimes that's bad if the fight starts to go south. You're probably going down with the ship. So she's just a bit riskier. I'd rather play something like Rakan if I want to engage, who has really good engage himself, but he's just not as risky. He has longer cooldown, so he doesn't have as much uptime on his CC. He doesn't have as much CC. as Leona does, but he's just less risky in my mind, and he has better scaling. But anyways, Leona is still very, very strong. And then I think Maokai's up here, and that may come as a surprise to a lot of people who haven't watched the channel in a while. But, I mean, he's one of the highest win rate champs. Like, no one plays him. He's only 2.6% play rate, but he's got a 53.5% win rate. So, he is a champion who is very strong right now. A lot of people are still going kind of the AP build with him, you know, with Arcane Comet, Scorch, and then just like Biscuit Delivery. So the AP build is popular on him, but I would say the tank build is really good too. They have nerfed that a little bit, but I can tell you, like, they nerfed Dead Man's Plate, but I can tell you this item, like, getting this item early is so strong on him. Is it basically gives him permanent mobility boots, but then you also get to take a defensive boot, right? Like, you can either go Plated Steel Caps or Mercury Treads, or even if you're going the AP build, you can go Sorcerer Boots. Although if you're going the tank build, you probably, I don't think, want to do Sorcerer Boots. But that gives you a lot of extra movement speed, which is nice. Then you can combine that with getting Locket second. But a lot of people are still just going the AP builds. And I think a big part of this is people are playing less tanks. They're going back to kind of squishier champions. And so this is going to do just a lot more. Each one of your seeds is going to trigger that extra damage off of Imperial Mandate because it's slow. And then you have the Demonic Embrace also adding on that extra little bit of damage over time and giving you some more tankiness. So overall, he is positioned very well. I think if you want to go tank or if you want to go AP, both options are really solid. So I think he's very good. You might say, well, why would you play this over Leona? Well, a big part of it's the vision. The seeds just give you a ton of vision over the course of the game. He does a lot of damage, especially with that AP build. You know, you will start melting people. You'll usually do second or third amount of damage just because it's so much poke. It's like Teemo Shrooms, but really good. Teemo Shrooms that actually give you a lot of vision on a lower cooldown. So I think that's pretty solid on him. Also, he just has a lot of CC as well, kind of like Leona, that he can hit multiple targets, especially with his ultimate. You know, it's very hard to dodge that, and it's just going to lock people down forever, up to 2.6 seconds just for that one piece of CC. And it's his W, if you can get close enough, is unavoidable CC. Like, if you just flash W, even if they flash, you're going to follow them, and you're still going to lock them up. So that's very good against a lot of the mobility out there, right? Like, Vayne's not going to be able to tumble out of it. People can't flash out of it. Lucian can't dash out of it. It's pretty much always going to get him. Sivir, she can spell shield it, but you're still going to be in position to knock her back when you're done, and then ult her. So he just has a lot of really favorable interactions with that. And your Q is a displacement, which can stop champions that are dashing. So if Lee Sin is trying to, like, connect with his second Q on your AD carry, you can knock him out of the sky with the Q, or Zack's trying to fly in, or Jarvan's trying to flag and drag, or Lee Sin's trying, or Xin Zhao rather is trying to, you know, jump to somebody. You can interrupt all of those. Or Leona is trying to go in with her E, or Alistar's headbutt, or just so many things you can interrupt with that displacement. It's like a Janna's tornado, but you have to do it when it's within like a very close radius to him. So a little bit more skill expressive, but very, very good if you can manage to pull that off. But the big ticket is he does a lot of damage, and he has a ton of vision control, and he has a lot of CC. So I might actually try him out again on stream again here in a little bit. When I first started playing him before he got nerfed, I went 19-1 on him. I went from like Platinum 4 to Platinum 1 in like 2 days. Or 3 days or something like that. It was nuts. Then he got nerfed a little bit, the meta changed, and I didn't do quite as well on him after that. But he certainly has the potential to be super, super strong right now, and he's definitely slept on by most people. Okay, last few champs, and we'll try to keep this under 30 minutes. I think Thresh is still pretty good. Nerfing the 30 HP off of him is quite a big deal. It did knock his win rate down by about 2%, so he's about 50% now. People are still playing him. He's still strong, you know. That just hurts his all-in, because now he actually can get blown up by some of these other all-in champs early. But he still has, you know, a nice utility hook on a fairly low cooldown if you land it compared to other hook champions like Blitzcrank. And you don't have to take the hook. It can just be used as a 1.5 second piece of CC for other people to poke. But then you can take it and go in and, you know, lock them up with your Flay and your ultimate. So you just have a lot of options. It's kind of like Rakan, a little bit more skill expressive, but you're just like a Swiss Army knife, right? You can peel, you can engage, you can get some of the utility items. It's very popular. to get Locket plus Redemption on him for supreme team fighting, and then just go Guardian instead of Aftershock and play this sort of utility Thresh. And I think that's an even better bet now because you're squishier early. I think Aftershock gets a lot less value. So he's still going to be good. It's just a little bit more difficult to make him work, especially on those all-in level 2s, but he's still going to have all the same toolkit, all the same abilities that he's always had. And then Bard got nerfed a little bit on this patch. It didn't really matter too much. Like, basically, they took off, I think it was like 10 damage off of his base meeps. That you got to keep in mind. He gets so many of those meeps, and they didn't hit the scaling. So, like, level 2 or something, his damage is going to be down a bit. But, you know, by the time level 7 or something rolls around and you get 30 meeps, it's really not going to be that much less damage, right? It might be like 5% less damage. But they didn't hit his roaming. He still is very fast with his tunnels, getting around the map. His ultimate still has a very short cooldown and lots of interactions. You can use it just kind of, you know, kind of stage 1 critical thinking. You can use it just to engage, but there are so many other things you can do. You can stop the towers by getting damaged by Shelly. The Rift Herald off of that. You can stop things like Karthus ult or Zed ults. There are lots and lots of different interactions you can do to save people and to engage on the enemy. So you can use it to dive if you need to. You can ult towers. You can ult Baron and give your your jungler time to get in there and possibly smite it. So lots and lots of uses of Bard. I think he can still be pretty good. He's very skill expressive, and you do have to roam around a lot to get a lot of value out of his kit. So it can be risky if you leave your AD carry alone. So he's best paired with something that's safe, like an Ezreal, if you want to be able to roam around. But he still has the same potential that he had before, in my mind. So a little bit less damage, but win rate's about the same. Kit is basically the same. Nautilus getting played a little bit more in Pro recently. I will say that his win rate is pretty bad. It's like low 40s versus Leona, I think, is like 80% win rate or something in the MSI tournament. But he's still pretty good. The thing that sets Nautilus apart from other tanks, there's a couple of things. Number one, his hook has a massive hitbox with a very low cast time, very low animation, so it's almost instant, and it feels like it takes up half the lane. So it's very easy to hit the hook if it's open field. He's very good at that, right? However, he can't hook over walls, so that you're not going to be able to take advantage of a lot of opportunities at catching people out as you would have with like Thresh or Blitzcrank. So he can't do that, but he can use it to hook the walls to escape. So that does give him a certain level of safety that some of those other champions may not have. His damage, I think, is also relatively low in the early game compared to something like a Leona or a Blitzcrank or probably even a Thresh. It just feels like he just doesn't do as much damage. Like, the hook is okay. The E is okay, but it just feels like they do more. And he's squishier. His shield is pretty dinky compared to some of the other champs. It's got a fairly long cooldown, and his base stats are much lower. I think he has like 36 armor to start with versus Leona has 44. Now, that's more than Thresh's like 28 in the early game, but he's just not as tanky as some of the other, like, big dog tanks out there. But the hook is easy to land, open field, and his ultimate is fantastic in team fights. It's a fairly short cooldown, but people can't block it. It's just going to get to the back line if you can get within 800 range of like the 80 carry, and it's a knock-up. So tenacity doesn't do anything to it. So you're going to get that full value of the knock-up. Does pretty decent damage, can hit multiple targets, and it just cannot be blocked, right? I mean, if they have some sort of tank, if they have like an Alistar and I guess Leona, it's difficult to block Leona as well because it just comes down right from the sky, then you can E and go through people, and that's part of what makes Leona strong as well. But if you're something like a Thresh, for example, and you're just staring down Alistar, who's just sitting in front of that Jinx that's blasting your team, there's not a lot you can do about that, right? You can maybe try to flash Flay if you can get in range, but you're just not going to be able to land a hook through that Alistar, right? But with Nautilus, you can. That missile goes underneath and is going to get that knock-up to disrupt her, hopefully long enough for your team to get on her. So he does bring a lot of nice stuff to the table, and he does have pretty good wave clear. Like, his E, can clear out waves. Obviously, you don't want to get a lot of the CS, but you can set it up really well for your AD carry to just AoE clear it. So he does have all those benefits. His mana costs are pretty high early on, so it is difficult in longer fights to put out decent sustained damage. he was a great user of the old Presence of Mind when he got 500 flat mana, but since they've nerfed that, it has been a little rough on him. A lot of people aren't going Frozen Heart. There might be a situation where that could be okay, but most of the time you probably want to go Zeke, so his mana situation can be rough compared to some of the other tanks in the mid to late game, but he's still alright. Okay, we'll go a little bit longer. Janna's okay. Like, she's good at peeling if you do have a Jinx or a Kog'Maw or some champion like that, especially if Lulu's banned, which she is going to be banned a lot, then that can still be a pretty decent option just to peel. The problem is she has no engage, so it's really hard to start a fight, whereas Lulu doesn't have engage either, or Yumi, but I guess Yumi has kind of a long-range R, which can maybe function as an engage, but they can speed up your allies offensively to get in there and make a play, right? So Lulu can speed up the Hecarim or the Darius or the Olaf or whatever, so they can get into position to make plays, right? Versus Janna, you don't have that. You don't have anything that speeds up your allies. Unless they're running to you with your passive, they get a little bit of movement speed, but she just doesn't have that go button, right? Like a lot of the other top-end enchanters do. So she's pretty good. Her ultimate also requires some pretty like careful positioning, and your teammates have to actually stand in your ult. And so she's still like good. Her shield does decay too, so her E, I believe, is about the same size shield as Lulu, but it costs more mana and it decays, and you lose the value on it if it breaks. The thing about Lulu is when she E's onto someone, it doesn't matter if the shield breaks. They still keep picks for 5 seconds no matter what. So they get that 80 damage for 5 seconds guaranteed if you put the picks on them. Versus with Janna, they get the like 50 AD as long as the shield lasts. So if that shield breaks, they no longer get the 50 AD. So in some situations where your AD carry is just, you know, getting blasted and you put the shield on them, they may get almost no benefit out of that AD. Versus with Lulu, they would keep that 80 plus damage no matter what. So I just think that Lulu is better positioned in most cases than Janna, and I would venture to say Yumi, if played correctly in a lot of different situations, is probably going to be better. But Janna's kind of a good sort of second or third string enchanter. Nami's okay. She can provide like all-in pressure in the early game, but she is going to get outscaled later on versus some of the other champs. She does have some movement speed stuff, which is very nice with Shirelia's. Right, you can use your E to move people. Your W can bounce around and hit multiple people. Even your Q, if you hit your ally with it, can move people. I guess your ultimate can too, because that speeds people up. So maybe she's better than I think with the new Shirelias. But I'll have to try it out and see. I haven't played against her a ton, but there are certain matchups where she can be pretty good. A lot of it just comes down to, are you going to be able to hit your bubbles consistently or not? And there's so many mobile champions out there right now, it's very, very difficult to land those bubbles if they're watching for it, right? You have to kind of catch them off guard or chain it together with other pieces of CC. And then Rel is still situationally pretty good. She has been nerfed a ton, but especially against a bunch of dive champions, if you can get, multiple stuns with your E, very good against Rakan, because anytime he tries to go in with his W, you just press your E, and it's almost like a point-click stun on him, which can, disrupt his W engage. So she's still all right. I just think that a lot of times there probably are better options right now. And then kind of as the final strings, I don't want to take this too long, Cinna can be good if you get a lot of souls early, if you can get ahead, just like most damage champions. She can be all right. She has a lot of damage. Her W, that root, is very nasty with a lot of other CC champions out there, like Jhin, that you can chain it together with. In the laning phase are like Kaitlyn traps. Very good with Kaitlyn because they can both poke really well under tower, harass people, and then just trap plus W or W plus trap. It's usually a death sentence. So she can be quite strong. And then Zyra just got a buff on this patch. She is pretty solid. She has great harassment. She's just will dominate almost anybody in the laning phase, most traditional supports. The problem is once you get out of the laning phase, she's very vulnerable to flanks. She's slow. Her only piece of real CC that's going to be able to stop somebody from engaging on you is a very slender hitbox that's pretty easy to dodge. So she's pretty bad open field. She doesn't have a way to start a fight. You just kind of have to pray that they walk into you into the bushes. So if you can get control around objectives and force them to come face check bushes to try to stop a dragon or a baron, she's very good in that situation. She can crank out massive amounts of damage in team fights. Very good against dive comps if they're trying to jump onto you. But pretty rough otherwise. Just that lack of mobility, lack of engage. And her items are very expensive, right? She's going to want to get Leandries, which is like 3,400 gold. Then she's going to want Demonic Mask, which is another 3,000 gold. And when you're trying to compare that with something like, you know, the Enchanters, who are going to be getting Shirelias plus, you know, some 2,300, 2,400 gold item, then you're falling really far behind unless you have a ton of kills. So she's good. It just requires the right kind of situation. I think gold and lower, she's going to be better because there's just going to be more kills available in those brackets. You can punish people's mispositioning a lot more. Brand, very similar to Zyra, same kind of deal. I think the main distinguishing point between them is Brand has less like guarantee on his harass. Like those plants, even if you miss your Q proc, if it's open field, they're going to hit somebody at least a couple of times, right? And trigger the Scorch, trigger the Comet. So she's going to get like guaranteed damage. And she has very good scouting with her plants and bushes. That helps out a lot. Compensate at least somewhat that she's not tanky and she can get blown up easily if she face checks. So she does have that going for her. Brand can face check bushes with his, or like spell check bushes with his W, but it's just not quite as good as the plants. But he has more uptime, so she has really long cooldowns on her plants. They did buff that a little bit to where you can get it down to 12 seconds per plant, but that's still going to be a long time versus a lot of Brand spells, I think, are like 6 to 8 second cooldowns. Now, they do cost a lot more mana. Your plants are free with Zyra, so most of the time you don't really have mana problems. You're more gated by the plant, the W plant procs versus your mana pool. Versus Brand, you can really run out of mana with Brand, a decent chunk. So Brand is also better at harassing under tower because Zyra under tower, the towers are just going to kill your plants in one hit, and they're a lot of your damage. So she's not that great at harassing under tower. She's good at pushing. She's good at harassing. But under tower, it's a little rough. Versus Brand, you know, if you hit those W's under tower, they can be pretty nice. And Brand is very good if people are grouped up in like a big team fight and you can get a lot of bounces and people explode on each other. Again, that's going to happen more often in gold where people just don't spread out when they get the 3 procs of the Brand passive. But he's still okay. There are probably better options though. Blitz, actually pretty good right now. People aren't playing tanks as often. They're still there. But if you blitz hook Thresh now, it was already a pretty good matchup, but now you're almost certainly going to kill him if you can hook him level 2, so that's good. Obviously, if you can get a hold of... Rakan's a pretty tough matchup. If Rakan has a pulse, he's going to dodge almost every hook with W. But like Lulu and Yumi can be very good hook targets. If you hook the person Yumi's attached to early in the game, you're probably going to get a 2-for-1 because she has a really hard time trading against that much pressure in the early game. Leona's kind of a tough cover. Depends on the situation. Maokai can be a tough cover, potentially. But a lot of these champions are going to be very, very vulnerable to hooks. And when people are playing stuff like Jinx, Jhin, those champions have a really hard time dealing with Blitz hooks. Unless they go Gale Force. But most of them are going to greed out and not get Gale Force against Blitzcrank. And his hook can't be cleansed. I think maybe you can cleanse and flash it. I'm not 100% if you can still do that or not. But it's certainly going to cost a lot of resources to try to get out of his hook. So, and he just does a ton of damage, and it breaks the shield, too. So that's really good if they try to get something like... what am I thinking of? The blood item or whatever that gives the really big shield. You can just wait until that procs and then use your ult to instantly clear the shield. So, very, very good against just a ton of different champions out there. But you got to land your hooks. So, very situational, high risk, high reward champ. Alistar's okay, but they nerfed his damage a ton. I'd rather just play a different kind of engaged support. Yes, he does have healing, so he can sustain through poke in the laning phase better. You know, his WQ combo is very difficult for a lot of champions to outplay. He does roam extremely well, especially when he's 6. He can take a lot of tower shots. But he just kind of falls off a cliff later on in the game in solo queue, in my opinion. He doesn't have as much CC as most of the other tanks. And his ult... I mean, it's useful, but it just doesn't do a lot to help your teammates out, and it just doesn't have a lot of CC on it, so he's okay. I think there are probably better options. Morgana, decent. Good jungler right now, statistically, but I just think as a support, she's okay. It just depends on the situation. She's very good against a lot of these CC champs, like a Leona. She can be very solid. The Q lasts forever. You know, your shield is very difficult for people to break, so on something like a Jinx... if she gets really fed and uses that shield, she can be pretty good. So, I mean, you could put her as high as A tier. I just feel like she can get destroyed by things like Lulu. If someone just gets Mikhail's and they just outscale you, right? If you have like a Jhin on your team and they have a Jinx, you have no way of getting on that Jinx. And you're just going to get outscaled most of the time. And if someone takes Cleanse or gets a QSS, that pretty much does away with your Q in a lot of situations. So then you're pretty much left with your Black Shield. So if you're really far ahead, she makes it very difficult for the enemy to interact with your fed person, your Jinx, your Katarina, whatever. So then she just feels like really OP. But if they have a higher scaling comp or they're ahead, it just feels like most other enchanters put in way more work. But anyways, that's all right. Last couple champs. Braum's playable, but has to have very specific situations, maybe with Lucian. Swain, very good in the early game, especially with something like a Jhin or maybe even like a Kaitlyn with the traps. Just something where if you can hold them still, the ADC can blow them up with a lot of damage. So that's good. Lux is okay. She has decent poke. It did get buffed a little bit this patch. She is very vulnerable to flanking, but if you do want to play, long range, sniping, harass type of champion, like a Vel'Koz or a Xerath, she's probably one of the better options there. At least she does have a shield to go with it, so that's nice. Pyke, haven't seen him in a long time. If he can get fed, he can take over games. He does have really good roaming. Fiddlesticks, I saw a pretty good Fiddlesticks support the other day with the new changes to the stacking item that does true damage and heals for a certain amount. It's still kind of expensive at 3,200, but being able to come online with that true damage pretty quickly is nice. The back half of your ultimate, which lasts for 5 seconds, the last 2 ticks of it would be true damage, so that's nice. And then your drain is going to end up being true damage. So, and he does have CC too. He has the point click stun, so you can get poked out, you can get hard engaged and blown up in the laning phase, but if you can get to level 6 and get a couple of kills and start snowballing, he can be very strong. Sona was kind of a flop this patch. I was wrong about that. I thought that she'd be a lot better with the changes to Moonstone, but she's still not that great. And I think that, honestly, Shirelia's is better on her because now you can just spam your auras and it's gonna proc Shirelia's a ton. So yeah, Shirelia's has actually ended up being a big winner. Maybe she's not as bad as I think she is. She still does have almost a 53% win rate, so maybe I'm not as wrong as I thought I was, but I thought she might go up a little bit higher. Look at this, though, 57%. I'm going to have to try that out. But again, you just spam your auras, and everyone gets extra movement speed. So I don't think that you want to play this into, like, Leona and stuff like that, but maybe it's playable into Lulu or Yumi or something like that. Maybe you can outscale them. So it looks like it's just Shirelia's and a Staff of Flowing Water, and if you have if they don't have a lot of assassins or ways to get on you might be able to blow them up. So we might have to try that out again, but definitely really high scaling, great beneficiary of the Shirelia's. Soraka, a little bit less so. She can still be strong. The problem with Sona is she has a hard time engaging, but at least you can speed your allies up with your E combined with Shirelia's, so that is nice. Soraka, on the other hand, has a really hard time doing that. She has still an okay win rate, though. So she's okay. I guess she gets Moonstone, but Shirelia's just better. Yeah, Shirelia's just better. Of course it is. It's better on everybody. So she's okay. I'd probably just rather play Sona most of the time. And then we'll go ahead and just end it there because I don't want the video to be too terribly long, but I did want to give you guys some in-depth content. But anyways, a lot of different supports, very viable right now. I think the support meta is pretty good. There are a lot of supports that are like in that 50 to 52% win rate range, which is where you want stuff, right? That's plenty of stuff that's solid. There aren't that many that are kind of in the gutter right now that are mainstream supports. There are a couple, Tom Kench, but most of them are in a pretty decent spot, right? And the high skill cap champs are about 50%, which is where they should be. Stuff that's difficult to play like Thresh really shouldn't be at 52 or 53% win rate because that means there's a lot of people that aren't playing him well that are still winning. So really, yeah, there aren't that many problematic. You got Tom, they know that. They're trying to rework him at some point as far as mainstream supports go. Yumi's at like 49, but again, she's harder than people think to play. Most people just end up inting with her because they don't detach from people who are making bad plays. Rel and Seraphine are down a little bit, but it's not that bad. It's close to 50%. And then pretty much everything else is about, 50% to about 53% near the top end. Maokai is a bit of an outlier, but I think that's pretty healthy balance-wise, and there's a lot of different champs that can work in this meta, so I think it's pretty good. Anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Have a good day, and we'll see everybody next time.